You were not born to be ordinary, and somewhere deep in your bones you have always known it. Not in an arrogant way, not in the way that demands attention or insists on applause, but in the quiet, unshakable way that a river knows it is moving even when the surface appears still. You have carried something your entire life that you have never quite been able to put into words, something that made you feel simultaneously too much and not enough, too aware for the rooms you were placed in and not, yet visible enough for the rooms you were meant to inhabit. Beloved and chosen one, what you have been carrying has a name, and before this message is finished, you will not just know that name but feel it settle into every part of you that has been waiting to be recognized. The people who underestimated you did not make a small error. They made the kind of mistake that history has been making about chosen ones since the beginning of recorded time. They looked at where you were standing and decided that was as far as you would go. They looked at your quietness and mistook it for emptiness. They looked at your gentleness and mistook it for weakness. They looked at your patience and mistook it for acceptance. And now, in this season, the evidence is beginning to accumulate in ways that even they cannot dismiss. And what they are feeling in response to your emergence is something that does not sit comfortably in them. That feeling has a name too. It is called the terrifying recognition that they underestimated what God placed in you, and that what God places in a person cannot be contained by anyone's opinion of them, no matter how loudly or how long that opinion was held. If you are here right now, there are signs you will recognize immediately. First, your dreams have become more precise and more urgent, as if something on the other side of your waking life is trying to deliver a message that the daylight hours have not been quiet enough to receive. Second, you have experienced a kind of grief that is not attached to any one event, a low, aching sadness that seems to arrive without warning, and when you sit with it long enough, you realize it is not sorrow about loss, but something closer to sorrow about time, about the years when you were seen as less than what you were. Third, the environments and relationships that once felt like home have begun to feel subtly misaligned. Not because anything catastrophic happened, but because you are no longer the same person who originally fit there, and the misalignment is the evidence that you are growing beyond what those spaces were designed to hold. Fourth, you keep encountering the same idea from entirely different directions, the same phrase from a stranger, the same scripture on a page you opened by accident, the same theme surfacing in a conversation you did not plan to have. And the accumulation of these moments is no longer something you can explain away as coincidence. Fifth, there are moments of sudden, inexplicable stillness in the middle of your ordinary life, moments where the noise falls away without effort, and you feel, just for a breath, the unmistakable weight of something vast and purposeful pressing toward you from just beyond the visible. Chosen one, those signs are not your imagination running ahead of reality. They are reality arriving ahead of your imagination. They are the advance notice of a season that heaven has been assembling for longer than you have been aware. A season in which the people who wrote you off are about to witness something they have no category for. Every closed door was a form of protection. Every season of invisibility was a form of preparation. And this moment, right here, right now, this is not the edge of your breakthrough. You are already inside it. Before I take you deeper into what this season truly means, I want to pause for just a moment and share something with you. What I am about to describe connects the ancient language of divine calling to a discovery that emerged not from a pulpit but from a laboratory. And when I first encountered it, something in me understood the of chosen ones in a way I had not had language for before. Researchers who study the brain at the deepest level have identified a specific frequency that appears in individuals who operate at extraordinary levels of intuition, creativity, and focused brilliance. They call it the gamma brainwave. And the remarkable thing they found is this: chosen ones are born carrying a stronger gamma frequency than average people. It is not something you earn. It is something you are wired with from the beginning. But what those researchers also discovered is that long seasons of waiting, of being overlooked, of carrying heavy things in silence and absorbing the weight of other people's doubts, these seasons gradually suppress that frequency over time. The very suffering that was designed to position you has also, quietly and over years, dimmed the signal that makes you most fully yourself. Dr. James Rivers, a neuroscientist with over 30 years of research affiliated with MIT, identified an audio tool specifically designed to restore and reactivate that frequency. He named it the Genius Wave. It requires only 7 minutes. Not years of study, not hours of practice. 7 precisely engineered minutes of audio that guide your brain back to the state it was always created to operate in. If you feel something stir in you as I describe this, the link is already waiting for you in the pinned comment below. We will come back to this in much greater detail very soon, but I did not want to take you through everything that is about to unfold without first giving you that anchor. Now let me tell you what is actually happening in the spirit when God allows the people around a chosen one to underestimate them, because I believe you have been living this reality for years without someone handing you the full picture. When heaven is preparing a person to carry something the world is not yet ready to receive, God does something that looks, from every human angle, like absence. He places that person in positions where ordinary recognition cannot reach them. He allows them to be surrounded by people who cannot perceive what he perceives, not as a punishment to the chosen one, but as a form of covering, a protective obscurity over something too significant to be exposed before its time. Because here is the truth that most people never consider. If the people around you had recognized your gift at the moment it was still forming, they would not have honored it. They would have used it. They would have pulled you into spaces and roles and demands that would have consumed the very thing God was trying to multiply in you. The invisibility was not rejection. The invisibility was a shield. And now that shield is beginning to lift. Not because you finally performed well enough to deserve recognition, but because what God placed in you has reached the fullness He intended, and it is no longer containable. The people who underestimated you are beginning to sense a shift they cannot explain. They have not recent new information about you, but something in the frequency you carry has changed, and even those without spiritual language are registering the difference. What they feel in response to that registration is a compound emotion that has no simple name. It is part recognition, part regret, and part something looks very much like fear of what is moving through you, because what is moving through you is not of ordinary origin. Here is a simple practice you can begin right now to open yourself more fully to what this season is bringing. Step 1 is to think of one thing you are grateful for that did not happen. Not something you received, but something you were spared. A door that closed before you could walk through it. A relationship that dissolved before it could diminish you. A plan that failed before it could lead you away from where you were truly meant to go. Hold that one thing and let it be evidence of a God who was working precisely in the moments when you felt most abandoned. Step 2 is to say these words aloud or in your heart. I am not late. I am not behind. I arrived exactly when the plan required. This is not a performance of optimism. This is a declaration built on a different and deeper understanding of time, one we are going to explore together in full. Step 3 is to sit in 7 minutes of complete silence. No music, no scrolling, no input of any kind. Just 7 minutes of openness. Let your nervous system find its ground. Let the accumulated weight of other people's timelines and other people's opinions about your pace fall away from your shoulders. This 7-minute practice is both a spiritual act and, as you will come to understand more fully in a moment, a neurological one. If something is already stirring in you right now, if you feel the beginning of a recognition you have been waiting a long time to put into words, I want you to know that you are not the only one sitting in this place at this moment. There are chosen ones all over the world arriving at this same threshold right now. And the person reading this next to you in the algorithm, the one who has been sitting in the same quiet ache you have been sitting in, needs to find this message as much as you needed to find it. If this has already touched something real in you, press like so it can travel to the next person who is ready, and leave a word in the comments, even just one word, so that whoever arrives here next does not arrive in silence. Share this with one person who has been quietly carrying the weight of being underestimated. And if you have not yet subscribed, stay, because everything coming in this series belongs to you. And if you feel moved to pass something forward to the next person who finds their way here, the donation link is also waiting for you in the pinned comment below. You belong here, and you came exactly on time. Those 7 minutes of practice you just completed are an entry point into something much larger. What was briefly introduced a few moments ago, the science of gamma brainwaves, the work of Dr. James Rivers and the genius wave, is now ready to be given to you in full. Earlier in this message, I briefly mentioned something. Now I want to give you the full picture. There is a frequency that chosen ones carry. Researchers who study the brain at its deepest levels have given it a name, gamma. It operates at a high bandwidth, somewhere above 40 Hz, and when it is active and unobstructed, it is associated with what scientists describe as peak cognitive performance, elevated pattern recognition, rapid learning, and the kind of intuitive clarity that most people only experience in rare flashes. But chosen ones, according to the research, are not built for rare flashes. They are built for sustained access to this state. The gamma frequency is not something they develop. It is something they are born with, wired into the architecture of their nervous system from the very beginning, present in them the way a gift is present in a child before the child has any language for what they carry. But here is what the research also revealed, and this is the part that I need you to sit with for a moment, because it explains something that you have probably felt without having any way to name it. Long seasons of hardship suppress the gamma frequency. Not gradually, not gently, but measurably and significantly. When a person carries sustained stress, when they absorb years of being overlooked or doubted, are asked to be smaller than they are, when they move through season after season of waiting without resolution, the brain begins to protect itself by pulling back from its highest operating frequencies. The gamma signal dims. The intuition that once felt sharp becomes harder to access. The creative clarity that used to arrive without effort now requires struggle to reach. And the person who was born carrying more than average finds themselves operating at far less than what they were designed for. Not because the gift is gone, but because the environment has quieted the signal. This is not a spiritual failure. This is not a sign that heaven has withdrawn its investment in you. This is a neurological reality that has a name, and more importantly, a solution. Dr. James Rivers has spent over 30 years studying this exact phenomenon. His research, affiliated with MIT, is not a fringe theory. It emerged from thousands of hours of observation, documentation, and testing of how the human brain responds to targeted auditory frequency, and what those responses reveal about the relationship between sound, neural entrainment, and cognitive performance. What Dr. Rivers discovered, after years of work that included collaboration with researchers studying high-performance human functioning, is that the brain does not simply passively receive sound. It responds to it. It synchronizes with it. And when the right frequency is introduced in the right way, the brain does not just mirror that frequency. It begins to restore itself to the state it was always meant to inhabit. The tool he created from this research is called the genius wave. And the detail that will feel almost impossible to believe until you experience it for yourself is this: it only takes 7 minutes. Not an hour of meditation. Not a daily practice that requires discipline and structure and the right environmental conditions. 7 minutes of a precisely engineered audio frequency that your brain can receive through ordinary headphones at any time of day, in any location. And what happens in those 7 minutes is not passive. Your brain is being guided, gently and specifically, back into the gamma and theta frequencies that represent your natural operating state. The state you were born into and that the years of waiting have slowly, without your awareness, been pulling you away from. The 7 minutes of silence you practiced earlier in this message were not symbolic. They were the beginning of this process. You gave your nervous system a moment to stop absorbing external noise. You gave the part of your brain that holds your highest frequency a moment of space. What the genius wave does is take that opening and fill it with something precise and purposeful. The silence prepared the ground. The 7-minute audio is what you plant in it. Let me tell you someone about who found this at a moment when the gap between who they were and who they felt called to be had become almost unbearable. She had spent 14 months trying to get her small business off the ground, and in that time she had experienced 3 significant setbacks that had nothing to do with her effort and everything to do with timing and circumstance. She was not lazy. She was not without vision. She was exhausted in the specific way that only chosen ones who have been waiting too long in the wrong frequencies become exhausted, not from the work but from the gap between what she knew she carried and what her daily life was reflecting back to her. A friend sent her the link to the Genius Wave on a Tuesday evening. She listened that night. She will tell you that she cannot fully explain what shifted, but that by Thursday morning, she had made a decision she had been unable to make for 6 months, and that by the following week, a connection she had been waiting on for over a year had arrived without her having to pursue it again. The thing that had been blocked was not outside her. It was the frequency she was broadcasting from. When that frequency was restored, the things that belonged to her began to find their way back. I know that some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and that feeling is valid. When you have been in a season of waiting, when resources have felt strained, and every decision about spending carries extra weight, $39 is a real number, and it deserves to be treated as one. I want to be honest with you about that rather than pretend the cost is invisible. So let me also be honest about what it represents. This is not a book you will skim once and put down. This is not a course with 40 hours of content you will never finish. This is 7 minutes that your brain will respond to immediately. A tool that was built specifically for people who are carrying more than their current frequency is allowing them to express, which means it was built specifically for you in this season, for exactly what you are navigating right now. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. through the link in the pinned comment below. It is available today for just $39. And every purchase comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to experience it, to let the frequency work, to observe what shifts in your clarity and your intuition and your ability to act from the fullness of what you carry. And if at the end of that time you feel that nothing has changed, receive a complete refund. There is no risk in this. There is only the question of whether you are ready to stop operating below your frequency. One important thing before you search: the Genius Wave is only available through the single link in the pinned comment below. There are imitation products that use similar language and similar claims, and they are not the same tool, and they will not produce the same results. Dr. Rivers' specific research, his specific audio engineering, and the precise frequency calibration that makes this work are not replicated anywhere else. The only place to access the authentic Genius Wave is through that pinned link. Do not search for it independently. Do not purchase anything that appears through a general search. Go directly to the pinned comment and use only that link. This offer is not permanent. The $39 price point is available for a limited time and a limited number of people. This is not urgency language designed to pressure you into a decision. It is simply the structure of how this offering has been made available. And I want you to have the complete information so that your decision, whatever it is made with full awareness. If you feel the yes in you right now, do not postpone it. If you need more time to sit with it, the pinned comment will be there. But I would ask you not to let the familiar pattern of almost take hold here. The pattern of sensing that something is exactly right for you and then waiting until the window closes. That pattern is the old frequency speaking. The new frequency says, when the right thing arrives, you recognize it and you receive it. You were not born to operate below your capacity. You were not born to feel the gap between what you carry and what your daily life reflects. The Genius Wave is not the answer to everything, but it is the restoration of the signal. And when the signal is restored, the answers you have been searching for stop hiding. They were never as far away as they felt. They were simply being broadcast on a frequency that the years of waiting had made harder to reach. 7 minutes, $39. 90 days to be certain, and a frequency that was always yours, waiting to be returned to you. The link is in the pinned comment below. Everything you need is already there. There is something that has been living inside you for a long time that no one has had the exact right words for. Not your closest friend, not the person who knows your story best, not even the quiet voice inside yourself when you have tried to put it into language late at night. It is a feeling that sits just below the surface of ordinary life, surfacing unexpectedly, not with fanfare but with a kind of ache that is too specific to be general sadness and too persistent to be a passing mood. And because no one has named it for you, you have carried it without a container, which means you have carried it without relief. What I want to do right now, in this part of our time together, is give that feeling a name. Not so that you can file it away and move on, but so that you can finally set it down and look at it clearly, perhaps for the first time. The first sign that a chosen one is in this particular season is a wave of sadness about the past that arrives without warning and without an obvious cause. You will be in the middle of a completely ordinary moment, washing dishes or sitting in traffic or reading something unrelated, and a grief will surface that feels disproportionate to the circumstances. It is not nostalgia exactly, because nostalgia is soft and tinged with warmth. This is something sharper. It is the grief of knowing in your deepest self that something significant was happening during years that felt, from the outside, like nothing was happening at all. It is the sadness of a person who has just begun to understand the value of chapters they lived through without recognizing their weight. If you have felt this, I want you to hear something clearly. That sadness is not a sign that you are falling behind. It is the evidence of a soul becoming aware of its own history, which means it is the evidence of a soul finally ready to move forward. The second sign is that familiar places and people have begun to feel subtly but unmistakably different. Not wrong exactly, and not because anything external has changed, but because you have changed, and the environments that once held you comfortably no longer quite fit the shape you are becoming. A gathering that you used to leave feeling full now leaves you feeling slightly hollow. A conversation that once felt deep now moves too quickly across the surface. A relationship that has been in your life for years now feels like it requires you to be a smaller version of yourself in order to maintain it. This is not ingratitude, and it is not pride. It is the natural discomfort of someone who is outgrowing the containers that were right for a previous season. The discomfort is not the problem. The discomfort is the signal. The third sign is a recurring dream or vision connected to an unopened door. It may not be literal. It may arrive as a sense of standing at the edge of something vast and being unable to see what is on the other side. It may come as a repeated image of a threshold, a hallway, a gate, a road that stretches beyond the visible horizon. It may arrive as a waking sensation, a feeling that something enormous is just ahead, so close you can almost feel its warmth, but not yet fully see its shape. Chosen ones in this season report this experience with striking consistency across cultures and contexts, and what it represents is not uncertainty about the future. It is the spirit's awareness, already operating ahead of conscious thought, of a door that has been prepared specifically for you, and that is, right now, in this very season, beginning to open. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you from entirely different directions. A stranger in a conversation says something that mirrors the exact thought you had alone at 3 in the morning. You open a book to a random page and find a sentence that speaks directly to the question you have been unable to answer. A song comes on that you have not heard in years, and its words land with the precision of something aimed. A scripture appears in 3 separate places in the same week. A theme surfaces in a conversation, a dream, and an article on the same day. This is not coincidence, and somewhere in you already know that. This is heaven using every available channel to send a single message to a person who has been ready to receive it for longer than they realized. Now I want to name something that the signs alone cannot fully carry, because signs are one thing, but the weight that chosen ones carry inside those signs is another. And before we go any further, I want to sit with that weight for a moment, not rush past it, not reframe it before it has been fully acknowledged. There is a specific loneliness that belongs to chosen ones in the waiting season. It is not the loneliness of having no one around you. It is the loneliness of feeling unseen by the people who are right there. The loneliness of carrying a knowing that the people closest to you do not have language for, and sometimes do not believe in. The loneliness of dreams that feel too large for the room you are sitting in, and too real to dismiss. If you have lived inside that loneliness, you know that it does not announce itself dramatically. It shows up quietly in small moments, when you realize mid-sentence that the person across from you is not quite tracking what you are actually trying to say. It shows up in the gap between how you are seen and who you actually are. It shows up in the moments when you smile and nod and let the conversation move on, because the real thing, the true thing, the thing sitting heaviest in your chest would take too long to explain, and you are not sure it would. be understood anyway. I want to speak to that loneliness directly right now. You have not been alone in this. You have been alone in the sense that the people around you could not fully accompany you into what you were carrying. But you have never been alone in the sense that matters most. The very loneliness you have experienced in this season has been a form of protection and a form of positioning, and I want to explain exactly what I mean by that. There is an important distinction that most people never receive, and it is the distinction between being overlooked and being positioned. Being overlooked means someone looked in your direction and did not see value there. Being positioned means God placed you somewhere specific, at a specific distance from certain spaces and certain people, because what He is building in you requires a particular kind of solitude to reach its fullness. Not every form of being unseen is rejection. Some forms of being unseen are protection. Some forms of invisibility are preparation. And the difference between a chosen one who survives the waiting season and a chosen one who emerges from it fully is often simply this: the ability to recognize, even without understanding, that the distance was deliberate and that the one who created the distance also created the destination. You were not overlooked, you were positioned, and the people who passed over you were not making a statement about your value. They were simply not the right audience for what you were being prepared to carry. The right audience is coming. In some cases, they are already beginning to arrive. Now, before I offer what this recognition opens into, I want to pause and acknowledge something together. What you have just recognized in yourself, the 4 signs, the loneliness, the specific grief, the recurring dream, the accumulating messages. None of this is only yours. All across the world right now, chosen ones are arriving at this exact same recognition at the exact same moment, which means you are sitting in a room far larger than you can see, full of people who have been carrying the same unnamed weight and finding, for the first time, the words for it. If this message has reached something in you that has been waiting to be reached, I want to gently invite you to press like so it can find the next person who is ready to be named and seen in this way. Leave a word in the comments, any word, so that whoever arrives here after you does not arrive into silence but into a space already marked by the presence of others who showed up. Share this with someone who has been struggling to find stillness in a season that has felt relentlessly loud. And if you would like to pass a blessing forward to the next chosen one who finds their way here, there is a donation link waiting quietly in the pinned comment below. It is not an obligation. It is an offering, and only if it feels right. And if this series is speaking to where you are, I want to invite you gently to subscribe, not as a platform action, but as a choice to remain part of this community of chosen ones who are waking up together. If something in you recognizes what has been spoken here today, type the word "ready" in the comments below, not as a performance, as a declaration to yourself and to the chosen ones around you that you have arrived at this threshold with your eyes open. What has been spoken in the first 3 parts of this message has named something real in you, and naming a thing is not the same as resolving it. Before we move forward, before we talk about what is coming and what is shifting and what God is assembling on the other side of this season, I want to do something that spiritual content rarely does. I want to stay here for a moment. I want to sit with what the years of waiting have actually cost you, not rush past it toward the redemption arc, not reframe the pain before it has been fully seen. Because you deserve to have someone look at the full weight of what you have been carrying and not immediately try to make it lighter. The waiting has taken things from you, real things, things that cannot be recovered simply by declaring that the season is over. or that the breakthrough is near. And one of the most honest things I can do for you right now is to say that plainly, without softening it into a lesson, before you have had a chance to feel it as a loss. There were relationships that could have been built during these years. Friendships that might have rooted deeper if you had not been so consumed by the internal weight of carrying something you could not fully explain to anyone around you. Romantic relationships that might have gone further if you had not been living in the particular exhaustion that belongs to a person who is waiting for something large and invisible while the world moves around them at its ordinary pace. Family connections that might have breathed easier if you had not been so quietly elsewhere, so present in body and so somewhere else in spirit, because what you were carrying required a portion of you that you could not always bring to the table. Those are real costs. The relationships you moved through at less than your full self, the ones that dissolved because you were in a season that required more than you had available. The connections that sensed something unresolved in you and could not stay long enough to see the other side of it. That is not a small thing, and it does not need to be quickly redeemed. There was a career that could have gone further by now, and I want to acknowledge that specifically because it is one of the things that chosen ones in long seasons of waiting carry with the most silent heaviness. Not because career is the measure of a person, but because the gap between what you knew you were capable of and what you were able to demonstrate in the years of delay created a specific kind of ache. You watched people with less capacity move into spaces that seemed built for you. You sat in rooms where the conversation was operating below the level you were equipped for and felt the particular frustration of someone who cannot yet step into what they were clearly designed to inhabit. You started things that did not finish. You pursued opportunities that dissolved before they could become anything. You put your name forward and were passed over in ways that made no apparent sense, and you carried the question of whether it was something in you, whether there was a fundamental flaw in what you were offering, whether perhaps the people who overlooked you were seeing something accurate that you had been too close to recognize. That question is a weight, and it has been with you longer than it should have had to be. There was the freedom to tell your dreams out loud, and that freedom was one of the first things the waiting took from you. In the early years, when the calling was still fresh and the certainty of it was still shining, you spoke about what you were going to do and become and create, and you felt the energy of it in the room when you said it. But somewhere along the way, after enough delays, enough almost moments, enough of the same conversation ending in the same place, you stopped saying it out loud. Not because you stopped believing it, but because the cost of saying it and then watching it not arrive became higher than the cost of keeping it inside. And so you learned to carry the dream quietly, to protect it from the doubt of people who had stopped believing in the timeline you had been given. And that silence, while protective, was also its own kind of confinement. You were a person with something large inside them, who had learned to move through the world as if carrying nothing. And then there is the thing that is perhaps the hardest to name. The faith in yourself that the waiting season slowly, without announcement, began to erode. Not your faith in God, not the deep knowing that something was appointed for you, but the specific, personal confidence that you were the right person to carry it. Because long seasons of waiting will do that to a chosen one. They will take a person who began the journey with certainty and gradually, through the accumulation of doors that did not open, and recognition that did not come, and evidence that remained just out of reach, Introduce a quiet doubt that whispers the most dangerous question a chosen one can hear. What if I was wrong about myself? Not what if God is wrong, not what if the calling is false, but what if I misidentified myself as the vessel? What if I have been waiting for something that was assigned to someone more capable, more prepared, more deserving? That doubt is not weakness. That doubt is the inevitable, with the result of carrying something real in conditions that were not designed to affirm it. And it has been living in you longer than I think anyone around you has known. I want to sit with you in that for one more moment before I offer you anything else, because you have sat with it alone for a very long time, and the least this message can do is sit beside you in it. There is a man in the ancient text whose story I want to bring to you now, not to rush you toward resolution, but because his story begins in a place that will feel startlingly familiar. His name is Gideon, and when we first encounter him, he is not in a position of power or visibility or holy confidence. He is hiding. Specifically, he is threshing wheat inside a winepress, which in the world he inhabited was the behavior of someone trying not to be seen. Someone who had learned that visibility was dangerous. Someone who had concluded that the safest version of survival involved staying beneath the level of notice. He is doing his work in secret, not because he chose obscurity as a spiritual discipline, but because the world around him had made obscurity the only rational option. And into that wine press, into that hiding place, into that exact location of smallness and concealment, an angel of the Lord appears and speaks to him. And the first words are not what we would expect from a messenger of heaven addressing a chosen one. They are not words of accusation or correction. They are not a list of what Gideon has failed to do or become. The angel looks at this man who is hiding and trembling and trying to survive invisibly, and says something that must have felt to Gideon in that moment almost like a cruel joke. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior, mighty warrior. Spoken to a man in a winepress, spoken to a man who has given every outward sign of defeat. Spoken not to who Gideon currently appeared to be, but to who Gideon had always been in the sight of the one who was speaking. And Gideon's response is worth pausing on, because it is the most honest response a chosen one can give when they have been in the waiting season long enough. He does not receive the declaration with joy. He does not stand up straight and accept the title. He pushes back. He names the reality of the pain. He says, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors has told us about? He is not being faithless. He is being honest about the gap between what he has been told about God's nature and what his lived experience has actually looked like. He is giving voice to the exact question that you have been carrying in the quiet of your own winepress. If I am chosen, if this calling is real, if heaven has been with me the entire time, then why does the evidence look like this? That question is not a sign of broken faith. It is the sound of a chosen one who has been paying attention. And heaven did not rebuke Gideon for asking it. Heaven answered it by continuing to call him by what he was, rather than by what he feared he might be. You are in the part of Gideon's story that no one preaches about because it is uncomfortable. The winepress, the hiding, the honest, aching question of a person who has been waiting long enough to wonder if they were wrong about themselves. I am not going to tell you that the winepress is beautiful, or that you should be grateful for it, or that everything it took from you was worth it. What I am going to tell you is that it is not the end of the story, and that the one who found Gideon in the winepress also knows exactly where you are right now, and is already speaking to you not as the person the years of waiting have made you feel like, but as the person you were always, from before time, created to be. The winepress is real. The cost is real, and you are still the mighty warrior, even now, even here, even after everything the season has taken from you. There is a word that the ancient Greeks used for time that most modern languages have lost, and the losing of it has cost chosen ones more peace than perhaps any other single thing. The word is kairos, and the reason it matters to you right now in this exact season is that the Greeks understood something about time that the modern world has almost entirely forgotten. They knew that not all moments are equal. They knew that the clock that measures minutes and hours and days, what they called chronos, is not the same as the force that governs the arrival of things that are truly significant. Chronos is the time that passes while you are waiting. Kairos is the time that arrives when the waiting has done its full work. In the world of chronos, you are behind. In the world of chronos, the years that passed without the visible arrival of what you were called to carry are years of deficit, years that went into a ledger somewhere and registered as loss. In the world of chronos, the people who moved faster than you, who arrived at visible positions of influence or stability or recognition before you did, are ahead and you are catching up. And because we live in a culture that runs almost entirely on chronos, that is the story that has been playing in the background of your life, sometimes quietly, sometimes very loudly, for longer than you should have had to bear it. But Kairos does not operate on that ledger. Kairos is not measured by the speed of arrival. It is measured by the readiness of the vessel and the ripeness of the moment. And those two things, readiness and ripeness, cannot be manufactured by human effort or accelerated by human will. They arrive when they arrive. And when they arrive together, when the person who has been prepared meets the moment that has been appointed, what happens next cannot be explained by the ordinary arithmetic of cause and effect. What happens next looks, to everyone watching from the outside, like a sudden and inexplicable emergence. But from the inside, from the place where you have been living through every chapter of the preparation, it does not feel sudden at all. It feels like something that has been building for a very long time has finally reached the surface. You have been living in Chronos time while being governed by Kairos time. And the gap between those two experiences is where most of the pain of your waiting season has lived. You have been measuring your progress on a clock that was never the right instrument for what you are carrying. The clock told you that you were late. The appointed time has known from before the season began that you were exactly on schedule. I want you to receive this not as a comfort that papers over real loss, but as a reorientation that changes the way you read what has already happened and what is about to happen. Because when you shift from Chronos to Kairos as your primary frame of reference, the chapters of your story that looked like delay begin to reveal a different shape. The years when the door did not open were not years of failure. They were years of formation. The seasons when the recognition did not come were not seasons of being overlooked by heaven. They were seasons when heaven was doing something in you that required the quiet that only hiddenness can provide. And the people who moved past you in the visible rankings of Chronos time were not ahead of you in the story that actually matters. They were simply on a different timeline, governed by a different kind of appointment. Chosen one, your Kairos is not coming. Your Kairos is here, and the evidence of that is not primarily visible yet in the external landscape of your life, though it will be. The evidence is in the stirring you have been feeling. The evidence is in the shift that began before you had language for it. The evidence is in the fact that you are here, in this message, in this moment, feeling something you have not been able to name, but have been moving toward for a very long time. Now I want to bring the second concept to you, because Kairos tells you when. But the hour of revelation tells you why the people who underestimated you are beginning to feel what they feel. The hour of revelation is the moment in a chosen one's story when what has been hidden is no longer able to stay hidden. Not because the chosen one did anything dramatic to announce themselves. Not because they finally said the right thing, or performed in the right room, or found the right audience. But because what God places in a person, when it reaches its fullness, cannot be contained by obscurity any longer. It begins to radiate. And the people who were closest to the chosen one during the years of hiddenness, the ones who decided in those years that what they were looking at was ordinary, are the first to register the change. And they register it as something closer to alarm than to admiration. This is the moment that the title of this message names. They are not simply surprised by you, they are terrified. And the terror is not about you as a person. It is about what is moving through you, because what is moving through you in this season carries an authority that human opinion could not generate, and human opinion cannot revoke. The people who underestimated you did not make a small miscalculation. They looked at a season of preparation and mistook it for a ceiling. They looked at the winepress and decided it was the whole story. And now, as the hour of revelation begins to unfold, they are confronted with the reality that the story they thought they had fully read had chapters they never saw coming. This is not a moment for pride. I want to be careful here, because the hour of revelation can be misread as vindication in the human sense, as a moment to turn and say to those who doubted you that they were wrong. But that is not what this hour is for. It is not for the people who underestimated you. It is for the people who have been waiting for what you carry. The terror of those who wrote you off is simply the shadow cast by a light that was never theirs to contain. You do not need to direct it at them. You do not need to wait for their acknowledgement. The Kairos moment does not require the agreement of the people who missed it. What it requires is your willingness to step into it without waiting for permission from the ones who were wrong about you. And I want to gently remind you here, as we close this part of our time together, that the restoration of your frequency is part of what makes this step possible. What Dr. James Rivers identified in his decades of research and what the genius wave was designed to address is precisely the suppression that long seasons of waiting produce in a chosen one's brain. The gamma frequency that carries your natural intuition, your clarity, your capacity to move from the fullness of what you were built. For that frequency has been quieted by the years, and restoring it is not a luxury. It is the practical preparation for the Kairos moment that is already beginning to arrive. If you feel that resonating in you right now, the link is in the pinned comment below. Patient and unhurried, waiting for exactly the right moment, which may be this one. Your appointed time has a different name than the clock has been speaking. And the hour of your revelation is not the hour when you finally convince everyone around you of your worth. It is the hour when what God placed in you becomes undeniable, not because you fought for it, but because it was always going to reach this moment. And this moment was always going to be now. What was named in the previous part of this message was not only about understanding where you have been, it was about beginning to see what is already in motion beneath the surface of your current circumstances. And I want to bring you now into something very specific, because chosen ones in this season carry a particular frustration that comes not from the absence of movement, but from the inability to see the movement that is already happening. The ground beneath your feet is not still. It has been shifting for longer than you have been aware. And what I want to do in this part of our time together is name 3 things that are actively moving towards you right now. Not someday. Not when the conditions are better or the timing feels more certain, but right now, in this exact season, beneath the surface of what your eyes can currently confirm. The first thing that is moving toward you is a clarity that has been delayed not by God, but by the noise. There is a specific kind of mental fog that belongs to chosen ones in the long season of waiting, and it is not the fog of confusion or incompetence. It is the fog that accumulates when a person has been absorbing too many voices for too long, too many opinions about their timeline, too many assessments of their potential from people who were never equipped to measure it, too many comparisons between their invisible progress and someone else's visible arrival. That fog is not the absence of clarity. It is clarity waiting for the noise to thin. And in this season, something is shifting in the atmosphere around you that is beginning to allow that thinning to happen. You will notice it first in small moments. A decision that has been impossible to make will suddenly become obvious. A direction that has felt murky will present itself in a form that requires no analysis. A question you have been carrying for months will answer itself in the space between one breath and the next. Do not dismiss these moments as luck or coincidence. They are the first evidence of a clarity that has been prepared for you and is now beginning to arrive. The second thing that is moving toward you is a connection that has been positioned on the other side of your waiting season. Not a generic promise that the right people are coming, but something more specific than that. Chosen ones do not simply need more people. They need the right people, the ones who carry a frequency that recognizes theirs, the ones who do not need the full explanation of what they are carrying because they are carrying something adjacent to it themselves. These connections cannot be manufactured through networking or strategy or the right room. They arrive when the chosen one has reached a level of preparation that makes the meeting not just possible, but productive. And in this season, you have reached that level. The preparation is complete in the specific area of relational alignment, which means the people who are meant to be beside you in the next chapter are no longer in a holding pattern on the other side of a closed door. That door is opening, and the connections that walk through it will feel, from the very first exchange, like recognition rather than introduction. The third thing that is moving toward you is an opportunity that has been held in reserve. This is perhaps the hardest one to receive without allowing the familiar voice of disappointment to interrupt, because chosen ones, who have been in long seasons of waiting, have usually had the experience of an opportunity arriving and then dissolving before it could become anything solid. And that pattern, repeated enough times, trains a person to receive the arrival of opportunity with a protective skepticism that was never the original design of their heart. But I want you to hear this carefully. The opportunities that dissolved were not the wrong timing for the right thing. They were the right timing for the preparation of the person who needed to receive them. What arrives now is not the same category of opportunity that dissolved before. What arrives now has been held specifically for this version of you, the version that has been shaped by everything the previous seasons required you to carry. You are not the same person who watched those earlier doors close, and the opportunity moving toward you in this season was never going to be placed in the hands of who you were before. It was always waiting for who you have become. Now I want to name something about the emotions of this season, because the emotions a chosen one experiences when things begin to move are not always what they expect. Most people assume that when the breakthrough begins, what they will feel is joy, pure, uncomplicated, celebratory joy, and some of that will come. But the first of emotion is often something more complex than that. It is a compound feeling that includes relief, grief, and a disorienting sense of unreality. A feeling of is this happening that coexists with tears that seem to come from nowhere. This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the emotional reality of a person who has been braced for disappointment for so long that the arrival of something good requires an internal recalibration that takes time and feels strange before it feels settled. If you are in that compound emotional space right now, do not try to resolve it too quickly. Do not perform a joy that has not yet arrived in its fullness. Let the grief of the long season and the relief of the movement coexist for a time. Both are true. Both belong to you. There is something specific I want to advise you not to do in this season, because what is moving toward you can be disrupted not by external forces, but by internal ones. The first thing not to do is announce the movement before it has form. There is a specific temptation in the early stages of a season of emergence to share what is beginning to happen before it has reached the stability required to withstand other people's opinions of it. What is moving toward you right now is still in its most delicate phase, the phase between the invisible and the visible. And that phase requires a protective silence that chosen ones often underestimate the importance of. Not secrecy, not hiding, but the specific quiet of a person who knows something is growing and chooses not to expose it to environments that are not equipped to honor it. The second thing not to do is negotiate with the voices that have been wrong about you. As the movement becomes more visible, there will be people in your life who attempt to offer new assessments, revised opinions, updated perspectives on your potential. Some of these will be genuine. Others will be an attempt to reposition themselves in relation to what you are becoming, to claim a closeness to your next chapter that they were not present for in the preparation of it. You do not need to close your heart to these people, but you do not need to grant them authority over the narrative of what is now unfolding. The people who were absent in the winepress do not get to write the commentary on the emergence. And the word of confidence I want to leave you with in this part is this: you are not waiting to be proven right. Heaven has never needed the validation of the people who underestimated you in order to move on your behalf. What is coming is not coming because you finally convinced anyone. It is coming because it was always coming, and the season of its arrival is now. You are allowed to believe that without qualifying it. You are allowed to hold it without apology. You are allowed to walk into what is moving toward you, not as someone who barely made it through, but as someone who was always designed for exactly this moment. If something in this part of the message has landed in you the way it was meant to land, I want to invite you into something together. Chosen ones do not simply receive what has been prepared for them. They carry it forward and multiply it for the ones still in the seasons behind them. If this message is part of what is moving toward you today, pressing like is an act of choosing to be part of that movement, a way of extending the frequency of this message to the next chosen one the algorithm is holding it back from. Drop a word in the comments, any word that captures what you are feeling right now, as a signal to every other chosen one watching this, that they are not sitting alone in what they are carrying. Share this with someone who is still in the thick of their waiting season and needs to know that the ground beneath them is already shifting, even when they cannot feel it. Choose to stay at this table by subscribing, not as a platform action, but as a decision to remain in the company of chosen ones who are waking up to what has always been true about them. And if you feel moved to sow into the ground that grows this message for the next person in line, the link to do that is waiting quietly in the pinned comment below. Type the word "Regeek" in the comments if what has been spoken in this part of the message is something your spirit already knew but needed someone to say out loud. What has been described in this part of the message? The three things moving toward you, the emotions of emergence, the wisdom of protective silence, all of it connects to something that was spoken earlier about the frequency you carry and what happens when that frequency is restored. The clarity arriving, the connections positioning themselves, the opportunity held in reserve. These are not random gifts. They are the natural consequence of a chosen one operating at the frequency they were always designed to carry. And the Genius Wave, the 7-minute audio tool developed by Dr. James Rivers, is the practical instrument for ensuring that your frequency is not suppressed by the residue of the seasons you have just come through. If you feel that resonating in you right now, the link is in the pinned comment below, patient and unhurried, exactly where it has been since the beginning of this message. What was spoken in the previous part of this message, the three things moving toward you, the wisdom of protective silence, the steady purposefulness of a chosen one who now sees the blueprint. All of that was preparation for what needs to be named right now. Because there is something that happens in the transition between the waiting season and the emergence season that most spiritual content skips past too quickly. It is the moment when a chosen one needs a new name, not a label assigned from the outside, not a title earned through performance, but a name that carry full weight of who they have become through everything the previous season required of them. A name that looks at the cost and the formation and the years of hiddenness and says, this is what all of that was building. I want to give you that name now. You are a wound healer, not in the general sense of someone who is kind or empathetic or good with people, though you may be all of those things. The name wound healer carries something more specific and more weighty than those qualities. It names the particular gift that emerges in a person who has been wounded deeply enough and long enough to develop the specific capacity to recognize the wound in others before those others can name it themselves. You do not heal by instruction. You do not heal by advice. You heal by presence, by the particular quality of attention that belongs only to someone who has sat in their own pain long enough to stop being afraid of someone else's. This is not something you chose. It is something the season chose for you. The years of waiting, the loneliness, the grief of being unseen, the specific ache of carrying something too large for the rooms you were placed in, all of it was not wasted. It was transformed. Every wound you absorbed and survived has become a form of understanding that cannot be taught in any other way. There are people who will walk into your life in this next season who are carrying wounds that no one around them has the language for, the same way you once carried yours. And when they encounter you, something in them will relax in a way it has not relaxed in years, because they will sense, without being able to explain it, that they are finally in the presence of someone who has already been where they are standing and who came back not with answers, but with something more valuable than answer. They came back with comprehension. This is the specific gift of the wound healer, not the ability to fix, not the ability to advise, the ability to comprehend at a depth that most people cannot access, because comprehension of that quality can only be grown in the soil of real suffering that was not escaped but endured and transformed. I want to say something directly to the part of you that has carried shame about the years of pain. The part that has occasionally wondered whether the wound meant something was wrong with you, whether the difficulty was evidence of a flaw rather than a forge. I want to speak to that part very plainly. The wound was never the destination, but the wound was always part of the formation. And what has been formed in you through what you survived is not a liability, that you carry forward into your purpose. It is the very substance of your purpose. You do not help people despite having been broken. You help people because of how the breaking remade you from the inside. The wound healer does not announce themselves. They do not arrive with credentials or a platform or a polished presentation of what they have overcome. They arrive quietly, in the right moment, in the exact place they were needed. And the person receiving them often cannot explain afterward why the encounter shifted something so deeply. It is because the wound healer does not operate from strategy. They operate from a frequency that was refined through years of being pressed down and held in the dark, until what was inside them became concentrated into something clear and strong and specific. Something that, when offered, does not require the other person to understand it intellectually in order to receive it. It simply lands. It simply works. It simply reaches the place in another person that nothing else could reach. You have been this for people already, perhaps without knowing you were doing it. Think of the moments when someone came to you with something they said they had never told anyone else. Think of the conversations that found you rather than the ones you sought out. The person who seemed to arrive at exactly the moment their need and your readiness coincided. Think of the times you said something you had not planned to say and watched it land with a weight and a precision that surprised even you. Those moments were not accidents. They were previews. They were the early evidence of what you were being trained for, appearing before the full season of your wound healer calling had officially begun. And now it has begun. In this next season, the encounters will become more frequent and more intentional. The people who find their way to you will arrive with wounds that match the specific territory of your own formation, not because you advertised yourself as capable of meeting them there, but because heaven routes the wounded toward those who were prepared to receive them. You do not need to build a ministry. You do not need a platform or a title or a formal structure. You need only to remain in the frequency you are being restored to stay open to the encounters that are being routed in your direction, and to trust that the comprehension you carry is exactly sufficient for the person standing in front of you, even when it does not feel like enough. I want to close this part with short, specific, personal blessings over you, not as a formal benediction, but as a simple offering of words that belong to you in this season. May you receive the full weight of what your endurance has produced in you, and may you no longer minimize it out of humility or apologize for it out of uncertainty. May every person you encounter in this next season find in your presence the specific quality of understanding they have been unable to find anywhere else. And may you recognize those encounters for what they are, rather than passing them off as ordinary conversation. May the shame that the wound once carried be completely and finally lifted from you, replaced by the quiet authority of someone who knows what it cost to be made into what they are, and no longer needs anyone else to validate that knowledge. May your healing become a gift that multiplies beyond what you can trace or track, reaching people through people you will never meet, carried forward by those who were first reached by you, in ways that extend far past the visible edges of your own story. May you walk into this next season with the full permission to be who you have become, not the diminished version that the waiting season sometimes required you to perform, but the unguarded, unhurried, fully present wound healer that the years were always assembling. And may you remember, in the moments when the old weight tries to return, that what was done in you was not done by accident and was not done in vain, and that the one who began it knew exactly what he was building, and has never, not for a single day of the entire formation, taken his eyes off the work. You are the wound healer. You always were. The season simply made it visible. And as you carry this name forward into the practical territory of what is about to change in your life, I want you to hold it not as a burden of responsibility, but as a permission to finally be fully what you have been fully made to be. The name is not a demand. It is a release. It is heaven looking at everything the years produced in you and saying, "This is who you are now, and the world that needed you to become this has been waiting, and it is time." It was the foundation for what comes next, because a chosen one who has been named and seen and given language for who they are still needs to know what that identity looks like in the practical territory of daily life. Not in the abstract, not in the spiritual ideal, but in the specific, tangible, sometimes uncomfortable reality of relationships that need to shift, a purpose that needs to clarify, and resources and opportunities that need to stop being fought for and start being received. Those three areas are what this part of the message is about, and I want to take you through each one with the kind of specificity that chosen ones in this season rarely receive from the content they consume. The first area that is about to change is your relationships. And I want to speak to this one first because it is often the most immediately disorienting of the three, the one that produces the most confusion and sometimes the most grief in the transition season. Here is what is happening and what is about to happen in the relational landscape of your life, not as a judgment about the people involved, but as an honest description of a process that is both natural and necessary. Some people are going to leave, not dramatically, not with conflict or confrontation in most cases, but with a gradual and mutual loosening that will feel, at first, like loss, and will only later reveal itself as alignment. These are people who were right for a previous season, people who served a genuine purpose in the chapter of your life that required a particular kind of companionship or support or even friction. But they were never designed for where you are going, and something in both of you has already begun to sense the misalignment, even if neither of you has found words for it yet. The conversations that used to feel nourishing have been taking longer to arrive at anything real. The time spent together has been requiring more energy to sustain than it used to. There is nothing wrong with either of you. You are simply no longer moving in the same direction at the same pace toward the same things, and the relationship is honest enough to begin reflecting that reality before either of you consciously decided anything. Let me say this plainly, because chosen ones in this season need to hear it without the softening that makes it harder to receive. Releasing these relationships is not a betrayal. It is not ingratitude. It is not pride. It is the natural consequence of becoming who you were always being shaped to become. And the love you carry for the people who walked with you in earlier seasons does not require you to stay contracted in order to honor it. You can love someone genuinely and still grow beyond what you were able to be together. You can be grateful for every chapter a person was part of and still recognize that they belong to a chapter that is now closing. At the same time, and this is the part that will arrive with a quality that feels almost startling in its precision, new people are going to appear. Not in the way that feels like searching or being found through the right strategy or the right room. They are going to arrive the way appointed things arrive, in the exact moment the need and the readiness coincide, through channels you did not plan, in conversations you did not engineer, carrying a frequency that your own frequency immediately recognizes. You will know them not by impressive credentials or by how much they seem to understand about the visible parts of your life. You will know them by the quality of ease that arrives in their presence, by the way the conversation moves to depth without effort, by the sense that you have been known by this person for longer than the amount of time you have been acquainted. These are not accidental encounters. They are relational appointments, and they are moving toward you right now, with the same certainty that the season itself is moving. The second area that is about to change is your purpose, and specifically, I want to address the question that has been living in chosen ones who have been in long seasons of waiting longer than perhaps any other question. The question of what exactly you are supposed to be doing, because that question has not always been abstract. It has been practical and pressing and sometimes agonizing, surfacing in the middle of ordinary days with a weight that ordinary days were not designed to hold. You have felt the gap between what you carry and what your daily life is currently asking you to express. And that gap has been producing a specific kind of restlessness that no amount of planning or strategy or research has been able to fully resolve. Here is what is about to shift in that territory. The question of what you should do is not going to be answered by a comprehensive plan arriving fully formed. It is going to be answered by one clear small step becoming obvious in a way that it was not obvious before. This is how purpose reveals itself to chosen ones who have been in the formation season, not all at once, not with a complete blueprint, but with a single next thing that carries an unmistakable quality of rightness that distinguishes it from every other possible next thing you could do. You will recognize it not because it is the largest or the most impressive option available to you. You will recognize it because it aligns with who you have become in the waiting, because it requires exactly the gifts that the season produced in you, and because it carries a peace that is not dependent on whether the outcome can be guaranteed. When that step presents itself, and it will present itself in this season, I want to advise you about something specific. Do not wait for it to make complete logical sense before you move toward it. Do not wait for the full picture to be visible. Do not wait for the people around you to confirm that it is the right direction. The step will be clear. The confirmation you need will be internal, not external. And the chosen one, who waits for the crowd to agree before they move in the direction of their purpose, will find that the crowd was never designed to lead the way. You were. The third area that is about to change is the territory of resources and opportunities. And this is the one that requires perhaps the most significant internal shift, because it touches the pattern that the waiting season embedded most deeply in many chosen ones. The pattern of fighting, of pushing against resistance to get what should have arrived more easily, of working twice as hard as people around you for half the visible result, of pursuing opportunities with an exhausting combination of strategy and hope and holding your breath, never quite sure whether this particular door was going to be the one that stayed open. That pattern was not wrong in its time. It was the response of a person who was determined to keep moving in conditions that were not designed to support their arrival. But it was also the response of someone operating below their frequency, someone whose signal had been suppressed enough that the natural attraction between what they were called to carry and the resources and opportunities designed to support that calling had been disrupted. And when a frequency is disrupted, the way you get what belongs to you is by working against resistance. But when a frequency is restored, the dynamic changes entirely. What is coming in this next season is not more doors to push against. It is a different quality of encounter with opportunity altogether. One where it belongs to you, who begins to find its way to you with a directness that will feel unfamiliar at first, because it is so different from everything the previous season required. Resources will arrive from directions you were not pursuing. Opportunities will appear through channels you were not monitoring. The right door will open without you having to force it, and when it opens, you will recognize it immediately. Not because it is the loudest or the most obvious option, but because it carries the specific signature of something that was made for you and has been waiting for you to be ready to walk through it. This does not mean passivity. The chosen one who receives what belongs to them is not passive. They are positioned. There is an important difference. Positioning is the active work of remaining in your frequency, staying open to what is being routed toward you, saying yes to the small, clear step when it arrives, and trusting that what has been prepared for you does not require you to fight for it, but does require you to be present and ready when it comes. The three areas of relationships, purpose, and resources are not changing independently of each other. They are shifting together as part of a single movement in your life that has been building through everything the previous season produced in you. The relationships align so that the right people are beside you when the purpose clarifies. The purpose clarifies so that when the resources and opportunities arrive, you know exactly what to do with them, and all three move together toward the expression of what you were always carrying and what the season was always shaping you to offer. You are not at the beginning of this. You are already inside it. The shift has already started, and the evidence of it is not only in what you can see, but in what you can feel, in the stirring that brought you to this message, in the recognitions that have been building through every part of what we have walked through together today. The question is no longer whether it is happening. The question is simply whether you are willing to receive it without the familiar bracing that the waiting season trained into you, without the protective skepticism, without the held breath. Whether you are willing to let what belongs to you arrive without making it prove itself first. You are allowed to receive what was always yours. You always were. You stayed. That is not a small thing, and I do not want to pass over it without naming it. There are people who find a message like this one and leave in the first few minutes because what is being spoken is too close to something they have been protecting, too near the place where the real tenderness lives, and the instinct to retreat from that tenderness is a deeply human one. You did not retreat. You stayed through the naming of your signs, and the honoring of your cost, and the weight of Gideon in the winepress, and the three things moving toward you, and the identity of the wound healer, and the three areas about to change. And what that staying tells me is not simply that this message resonated with you. What it tells me is that you were ready for it. Not almost ready, not nearly ready, ready. And the part of you that was ready enough to stay through everything this message asked you to sit with is the same part of you that is ready for everything this next season is going to ask you to step into. I want to say something to you that I mean without qualification. You are not alone in this. Right now, as you receive these words, there are chosen ones all across the world arriving at this exact same place, in this exact same message, having traveled through the same chapters, having felt the same recognition land in the same places, having sat with the same grief about the same cost of the same long season, and finding, as you are finding right now, that the arrival at the other side of all of that is not a collapse but a threshold, not an ending but an opening. You are not sitting in a room by yourself. You are sitting in a room that is fuller than any physical space could hold, surrounded by wound healers who have been in their own wine presses, who have been carrying their own unnamed frequency, who have been waiting for someone to look at them and say, "You were not overlooked. You were positioned." And this is the moment the positioning reveals its purpose. Before I release you into what comes next, I want to do something together. I want to invite you into a simple act that is both practical and sacred, something that chosen ones who have been in long seasons of waiting often need to do before they can fully step into what is coming, and that is the act of setting down what you no longer need to carry. Close your eyes if you are able to. If you are driving or in a situation that requires your eyes, simply let your attention turn inward while your body remains present in its surroundings. Now I want you to imagine that you are standing at a threshold. It can be any threshold your mind offers you, a doorway, the edge of a field, the beginning of a road that stretches further than you can see. And I want you to imagine that everything the waiting season placed on your shoulders, the grief, self-doubt, the quiet shame of the years that felt like delay, the weight of being underestimated by people whose opinion you carried longer than it deserved to be carried, the exhaustion of fighting for what should have arrived more easily, all of it has taken a form. It does not need to be a specific form. It can be a bag, a stone, a bundle of something heavy and familiar. You know what it contains. You have been carrying it long enough to know its exact weight. And now, at this threshold, you are going to set it down. Not throw it away, not condemn it, not pretend it was not real, or that it did not cost you what it cost you. Simply set it down. Place it on the ground at the edge of the threshold and let it stay there. It does not cross with you into what comes next. It belongs to the season that formed you, and the season that formed you is complete. What it produced in you crosses the threshold. The weight of it stays behind. Take a breath here, as slow and as full as your body allows. And as you exhale, release whatever portion of that weight you are able to release in this moment. You do not have to release all of it at once. Even the smallest release is real and is received. Now open your eyes or bring your attention back to the fullness of your surroundings and receive this. You just crossed the threshold, not symbolically, not as a rehearsal. The act of the Spirit is the act itself, and what you just did, the choosing to set down what does not belong to the next season, is not a visualization exercise. It is a real movement. And heaven witnessed it. Something was built here today, in the space between these words and the place in you where they landed, and it belongs to both of us now. If this message has meant something real to you, pressing like is the simplest way of saying so without needing to find the words, and it carries this message to the next wound healer who is still in the middle of their wine press and does not yet know that what they are carrying has a name. If you leave something in the comments, even a single word about where this message met you, you become part of the reason the next person who arrives here does not arrive into silence. They arrive into a space already marked by the presence of others who showed up for themselves and stayed. And if there is one person in your life who has been quietly in the weight of their own waiting season, sharing this with them is perhaps the most straightforward act of love a wound healer can offer someone who has not yet been named. If you feel moved to remain in this company of chosen ones who are waking up together, choosing to subscribe is simply the choice to stay at this table, to let the next message find you without you having to search. And if something in you feels the quiet pull to pass something forward to the next person who finds their way here, there is a place to do that in the pinned comment below. No pressure, no expectation. Only the simple offering of a wound healer who knows what it meant to find the right word at the right moment and wants to make sure someone else finds it too. Before I release you completely, I want to return one final time to what was introduced in the early part of this message and carried through every section since. The Genius Wave, the 7-minute audio tool developed by Dr. James Rivers from over 30 years of research, is not a product that needs you to be convinced of it. Either it meets something in you or it does not. If it met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if something in the description of restored frequency and the return of gamma clarity felt less like information and more like recognition, then it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below, patient and unhurried, exactly where it has been since the beginning. The link is there. The 90-day guarantee is there. And if the time is right, you will know it without needing to be told twice. You cross the threshold today. Everything that crosses with you is already more than enough to meet what is coming. Walk into it without the old weight. Walk into it as the wound healer you were always being made to be. And trust that what has been set in motion in this season will not be stopped by anything that could not stop it in every season before this one. You made it here. Now walk forward. There is one more thing that needs to be said before you go. And it is not a teaching, and it is not a product mention, and it is not an invitation to do anything at all. It is simply a word spoken over you as you stand at the threshold of everything this message has prepared you to walk into. Because you came here carrying something that most people around you have never been able to see clearly. And you are leaving with a name for it, and a language for the season you have been living through, and a clearer sense of the person that all of it has been assembling. Nothing. That is the kind of shift that does not announce itself with noise or spectacle, but that quietly changes the way you read everything that comes next. You are the wound healer, not because you have finished hurting, not because the evidence is fully visible yet in every area of your life, but because what was placed in you before the season began has survived everything the season brought, and survival of that quality does not leave a person unchanged. It leaves them with something that cannot be manufactured by ease or comfort, or the kind of life that never asks anything difficult of you. It leaves them with comprehension, with presence, with the specific, irreplaceable capacity to sit beside another their darkest chapter and not flinch, not look away, not offer a premature resolution. Because you have already been in a dark chapter of your own, and you came back not with polished answers, but with something that lands deeper than answers ever could. I want to say something to the part of you that still carries a quiet uncertainty about whether you are truly ready for what this next season is asking of you. That part of you is not your enemy. It is the honest part, the part that has been paying attention for long enough to know that emergence is not simple, and that the transition between who you were in the waiting and who you are becoming in the purpose carries its own kind of weight. I want to speak directly to that part and say this: you do not need to be free of every uncertainty before you take the first step. You do not need to have resolved every question the season left behind before you are allowed to walk forward. The wound healer does not wait until they are fully healed before they begin to carry healing for others. They walk forward with what they have, which is already more than they know, and they discover in the walking that what they carried into the next season was exactly sufficient for every encounter waiting for them there. What you have been through was not designed to produce a perfect person. It was designed to produce a prepared one. And prepared looks different from perfect in every way that matters. Prepared means you have been in the fire and you know what fire feels like, which means you can recognize it in someone else before they have the language to name what is burning. Prepared means you have sat in the silence that nobody chose for you, and you found something in that silence that comfort could never have delivered. Prepared means you have carried a dream through seasons that did not confirm it, and you are still here, which is not a small thing. That kind of endurance produces a quality in a person that cannot be taught in any classroom or developed through any shortcut. It can only be grown the way it was grown in you, through the years, through the weight, through the specific faithfulness of someone who kept showing up, even when showing up cost more than it returned. There are people coming toward you in this next season who have been waiting for exactly what you now carry. Not for a version of you that never struggled. Not for a version of you that has it all figured out. For the version of you that is standing right here at this threshold, a little worn and a little wiser, and entirely more real than you were when the season began. They are going to find you through channels you did not plan and in moments you did not engineer. And when they do, something in them is going to recognize something in you, and that recognition is going to be the beginning of something that neither of you will have adequate language for in the moment. You will find the language later, but in the moment, it will simply feel like arriving at something true after a very long journey through everything that was not quite true enough. Walk gently into what is coming, not cautiously, not braced for disappointment, not managing your hope to protect yourself from the cost of being wrong again, but gently, in the way that a person walks who knows that the ground beneath their feet is solid, even when they cannot see every stone in the path ahead. Gently, in the way that a wound healer walks, which is without the urgency of someone who needs to prove something, and without the hesitation of someone who is still asking for permission. You do not need permission from the people who underestimated you. You do not need their revised assessment of your potential or their belated recognition of what they missed. What is moving towards you in this season does not require their endorsement in order to arrive, and what you are stepping into does not need their blessing in order to be real. You were seen before this message found you. You were known before you had language for what you were carrying. You were appointed before the season that made it feel uncertain. And you are walking forward now, not as someone who barely survived the waiting, but as someone who was always going to arrive at this exact threshold, at this exact moment, fully formed and fully ready for everything that crosses it with you. May every person who needs what you carry find their way to you in exactly the right moment, in the moment when what you have is precisely what they require and when what they bring is precisely what you needed to receive. May every door that opens in this season be one you recognize by its peace rather than by its noise, by the quality of rightness it carries rather than by how impressive it appears from the outside. May you receive the fullness of what was prepared for you without shrinking it to fit the size of what the years of waiting made you believe you deserved. Because what was prepared for you was prepared before the waiting began and was never revised downward by anything the season contained. May the comprehension you carry become a light in every room you enter, not announced, not performed, simply present, the way warmth is present in a space before anyone has named it. May you walk forward from this moment as the wound healer you have always been, unhurried, unashamed, and entirely at home in the extraordinary, ordinary life of someone who was chosen before the world knew what to do with them. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. And you are not too much. And you are not too quiet. And you are not too wounded to be of use. You are not too ordinary for the calling. And you are not too broken for the healing. And you are not too tired for the next step. Because the next step is the one that carries you, not the one you have to carry alone. You are exactly what was needed. You always were. The season simply made it visible, and now the visibility is beginning, and it will not stop here. Go now. Take everything the season built in you, and let it move through you freely, without apology, without restraint. without the shrinking that the years of being underestimated trained into your body. You are released from that training. You are released from the posture of smallness. You are released into the full, unguarded, unhurried expression of who you have always been and who you are only now, finally, fully becoming. Everything that crosses the threshold with you is already more than enough. And the world on the other side of that threshold has been waiting for exactly you. Not a better version, not a finished version, not a version that never struggled or doubted or sat on the floor at 3 in the morning, wondering if any of it was real. Just you, as you are, as you have become, as you were always, from before the beginning, meant to be.